the financial markets, which are quite powerful nowadays, they have a lot of confidence in the central banks, and they do not trust, they have very little confidence in the political parties, because that is why, central banks have become leaders in the process of coordination, because they could guarantee the country, the economy, and the citizens that the national policy was not going to generate waste of resources or bad results. Government has to take an initiative in this direction of improving the quality of public policy.
Hello friends, welcome back to another episode of Future Frame TV. I'm Elise Krozer, your host for the Inequalities channel. Traces.Dreams is the presenter of this channel. I have the pleasure of being here today with Dr. Carlo Panico, who is a professor of economics at the economics faculty at the National University in Mexico, UNAM. Carlo is a specialist in financial events, income distribution, and growth. And we will be talking today about the intersection of inequality and these larger government policies and central banks.
Yes. Well, let me first say that we need in economics in general, to a lot of attention to the institutional part of the organization of the state, the organization of policy, because but this is the part that we need to know well in order to interpret what is going on in our world and what we need to improve growth and distribution, to improve equalities of income distribution.
I'm very happy you say that, because you can help us with understanding these things better.
Let's hope so. This is the general statement. If I go on the details of these things, economic theory in general has seen that there is the real part of the economics, that is separated for the monetary parts. And this is an approach that has been criticized several times in the history of economic thought. The most important attempt was Keynes' general theory. What happens in the financial world is crucial for the determination of distribution and growth of the economy. So I would start with that. And Keynes gave a lot of importance to the role of central bank in these things. The central bank at the time had a role which was that of coordinated itself with fiscal policy. In those times, there was independence of central bank, but not in the sense that has been developed in the 70s and the 80s, in the sense that Keynes clearly said several times that the independence of the Bank of England was an asset for the country. If Bank of England was independent of the pressure of the city of London, so the private sector, of the public sector, it would have made better decision for the economy as a whole for the citizen.
How is the situation today? Since Keynes, things have developed, and Keynes is still very relevant today, but also the situation, the external context has changed. What would you say is the role of a central bank today?
It's become much more important, because since we have in the 80s and the 90s, we have all this liberalization of the financial movements all around the world, and then a really big change in financial regulation, which of course after the Bretton Woods era ended up. So in the 70s and the 80s, we have the financial industry, the financial sector has grown enormously, more than the rest of the economy. And so, we must have stronger institutions to counteract the power of the financial sector of the financial industry. So from this point of view, central bank has acquired more powers. In a sense, there has been an exaggeration of this power given to the central bank, because the central bank has become the leader in the process of coordination on fiscal and monetary policy. And this has not been working very well. So, the things have been changed since the crisis of 2007, 2008, the financial crisis. And then there has been also debt crisis in Europe, and that is affected quite a lot the coordination between fiscal and monetary policy. And the central bank was the leader in the process of coordination because the euro was going to collapse at the beginning of 2012, no? Because of the way policy was organized, was institutionally organized. So since then, there has been a process of reform, several reforms. In Europe in particular, they have been very interesting, this reform, because slowly, now we have that much discretion has been given back to fiscal policy before the pandemic, already. And we have in Europe, we have a much better form of coordination to identify the policy mix between monetary policy and fiscal policy that is the best, most convenient for the whole euro area. And this is done because we now have in Europe, we have a fiscal council, national fiscal council in all the countries of the euro area. And we have a fiscal European agency, which is supranational. So the new process of coordination see the participation of the European Commission, of the European Central Bank, of the European Fiscal Agency, the national governments, and the National Fiscal Council. All together, they've been able to work much better, the coordination between fiscal and monetary policy. And now we have an institutional setting in the euro area, which is quite advanced. And I hope that this is going to work much better than before. We did not have this form of institutional organization. With the pandemic, things have changed even more in the sense that now the European Central Bank, also the Federal Reserve, has recognized clearly that they have to actuate to be at the service of the government authority, of fiscal authority, because the government and the fiscal authority have to drive the process of reconversion of the economy, of trying to start again to recuperate the previous growth, and also to reintroduce the national economy in the new international context, new international commerce and relations that the pandemic is creating. So, we are having huge financial fiscal deficit, and the central banks are simply providing the resources, the financial resources, to avoid that there is a new debt crisis in Europe. The same is in the United States. United States now are recognizing in the last years that inflation is not a danger anymore because the workers have lost their capacity to negotiate increase in salary, in wages. So, there is no much problems of inflation, as Jerome Powell said in his conference in August 2020 at Jackson Hole. So he said that the main problem now is to obtain the maximum possible employment. So there is another big change in the United States in the coordination between fiscal and monetary policy. I think these are important things because if the state goes back to drive the economy, to lead the markets and the economy, and we can do that with the coordination at the international level, let's hope that the G20 that is going to be made in Rome in this year, will follow this line, and so there will be big agreement, large agreement between the United States, Europe, and the Asian countries. And this new strategy can benefit all the world in terms of growth. And if we grow, most probably we can improve as well. We can improve income distribution, which has been going very badly in the last 30, 40 years now.
So, before we go into the inequality part, Carlo, you were talking a lot about the coordination of these different institutions and the new importance of especially in the pandemic, of fiscal policy and how we have to coordinate between these different objectives, let's say. How do you reach coordination between institutions?
Well, the main problem is confidence, trust, which has been missing recently. I mean, usually in the past, there was a lot of confidence between the monetary and the fiscal authority, and the parties, the political parties that were leading the state and then fiscal policy. But then there has been this big change in the 70s and the 80s. Whatever was public sector, whatever was driven by politics was very bad. So we absolutely must have a change in this situation. The debate that we have had in the literature on this point since the beginning of the 90s has been exactly based on the fact that we have that the financial markets, which are quite powerful nowadays, they have a lot of confidence in the central banks, and they do not trust, they have very little confidence in the political parties. So, I mean, this is what makes coordination difficult at international level, because that is why central banks have become leaders in the process of coordination, because they could guarantee the country, the economy, and the citizens, and that the national policy was not going to generate waste of resources or bad results. I mean, this was clearly identified by the literature already in the 90s. So that is why there has been a lot of proposal of reform. The objective of this proposal of reforms was that we must improve the quality of fiscal policy, of government policy. That is the main problem. So that in this new situation, when the decision on the fiscal policy are not just made by the political parties, but are made by the political parties within the parliament and the government, but they are supported more with the knowledge of the experts, experts that are independent. I mean, the setting up of the National Fiscal Council or national agency, fiscal agency, is a way to integrate knowledge, technical knowledge, with the formulation and execution of fiscal policy, government policy. And in this situation, we have that the central bank can play a role, because they can, by cooperating more with all the other authorities, they can guarantee vis-a-vis the financial market what is going now to be done in terms of coordination, in terms of giving back the discretion to fiscal policy, is not something that will produce wastes, resources or other things like that. So this is the way the literature has been developing. And in Europe, these reforms have been made already on this side, trying to obtain these objectives. And I think that this has been done all over the world, particularly in emerging countries, where the confidence in the political parties from the financial markets normally is even lower. The financial market do not trust political parties in general, but they trust even less in third world countries, in emerging or developing countries. So this is the kind of reform that have to be pursued, especially in emerging countries, in Latin American countries and the other countries.
We're seeing the curious situation in Mexico that these dynamics that you described, they have fallen to their other end extreme, let's say, where there is now, from the government side, a favor towards austerity politics. And there is not specifically a reaction to the pandemic or to this global paradigm change that you were just describing. Do you think that's a problem, or is that just a different way of doing things? Or
no, that is a big problem, because all over the world, particularly the rich country, austerity has been abandoned. With the pandemic, even more has been abandoned. You are now going to the opposite side. But I mean, in Latin America, in particular in Mexico, we are going on with austerity. So the government does not spend, but if other countries spend, they try to reintegrate their economies into the new international relation, international commerce, the chain of values, no? And Mexico does it. I mean, the result would be that Mexico will go backwards and backwards. So even monetary policy, which has been having some satisfactory result recently in terms of macroeconomic stabilization, is not going to work as time goes by. Because one of the reasons why there can be speculative attacks against the currency, it's because the current account of the balance of payment is deteriorating. And if we do not try to fortify this productive structure and the international competitiveness, this is what has already happened and will happen even more in countries like Latin America, in particular in Mexico. So it is quite important that we come out of austerity. But to come out of austerity, we must make the reform I was mentioning before to improve the quality of government policy, of public policy. Otherwise, I mean, the financial markets will think that if the government start to spend more, came out of the austerity without this reform, is going to generate a lot of waste of resources, or they can even interpret it as an attack against the independence of the central bank. In both cases, we are going to have a high risk of speculative attacks against the pesos, the Mexican pesos.
And there is where the subject of inequality comes back in, of course, sneaking, not even sneaking very much. That, of course, there is an inequality between central banks even in different countries, but also the effect that these policies have on the distribution in a country are very stark, right? Either way, if this course is not changed, how do you imagine will this impact on the income distribution?
It will worsen quite a lot. Because, I mean, if you have a country that whose international competitiveness is deteriorating, so the current account of the balance of payment is going worse and worse, we need to grow more to maintain equilibrium in the balance of payment. So a country cannot improve growth in this situation. So it's going to grow very little, and if it grows little, employment is going to deteriorate as well. I mean, particularly, there will be a lot of informal workers. Formal work will increase in general. And this does not help the organization of the workers in general to get better condition in the labor market, better laws, improvement in the wages, all these sort of things. As a matter of fact, in the last years, international negotiation have imposed in Mexico some improvement in the labor market, which is something that has to be avoided. It cannot happen anymore. So if we don't start again in Mexico to abandon austerity, abandoning austerity means increasing public investment. And public investment is the main elements to improve the productive structure and international competitiveness. No? We are going to get in a vicious circles that will lead worse and worse the Mexican economy, and then the living condition of the population in general. So this is what is going to happen.
I mean, you know this answer, and I'm sure that other experts also think about that. So it's not a technical issue, let's say. I mean, we know what should be done. Is it then, I mean, this is of course a leading question, but is it then a political issue, or what is the problem?
Well, technically, we know what has to be done. I mean, we have to use more financial resources that are present in the balance sheet of the central bank, because by using that, we can avoid increasing the public debt, if we come out of austerity. This is the first step that we have to take to protect the country. But to do that, we know that we must improve the quality of government policy or public policy. If we don't do that, it's impossible to make this step forward. And so we technically know what we have to do. But this is the real challenge. It's a political challenge. Even the government has to take an initiative in this direction of improving the quality of public policy. And so trying to base itself on what we can read in the international literature of these experiences that have already been made in other countries, it has to integrate in a more efficient way technical knowledge and public decision, political decision. And the final decision, the ultimate decision, belongs to the Congress, belongs to the government, belongs to the democratically elected bodies. But this does not mean that we must improve the quality of the decision by having stronger support and most efficient support of the experts who know how to make a forecast of what is going to happen to the rate of growth of the economy, or what we are going to collect as taxation, or what has to be done to improve transport, infrastructure, or to improve the productive structure of the economy, or to reduce the bad effects of international competition on the balance of payment. This is not something that any citizen knows, or even of any member of the Congress knows. So as Keynes was saying, discussing this issue, we must integrate more as we can technical knowledge with political decision. There is no other way. And of course, if we have that some independent technical bodies can intervene in the government, in the public policy, in the government policy, we also, the central bank, can participate more in this process, because it will feel more relieved with respect to the task it has with a powerful financial market, international financial market, that can make some speculative attacks at any moment in economies, in a liberalized situation like in which we live.
Carlo, I know you have been researching these subjects for decades. Since your time in Cambridge a long time ago, basically, or maybe even since before. What got you interested in researching these things in the first place?
I think that monetary economics, the part of economic theory and economic policy that, in a sense, needs to know more how real things works. I had this impression when I was a student, so I devoted to that. But then, what happens when I was doing my PhD in Cambridge? Margaret Thatcher was arriving, and then they started the monetarist experiment. So with rate of interest jumping up to very high level. So, I was really impressed by the effects on income distribution experience and then on growth. So I was also induced to deepen these kind of problems. I must say I was also fascinated before the Margaret Thatcher. I was fascinated by the experience of England in 1940. Well, after the Second World War, they implemented a cheaper money policy to create the welfare state and to reconstruct the economy. It was a very interesting experience, which was going to produce good results, but was interrupted by political elements, in particular the conflict between the city and the rest of the economy. Because I read the memoirs of Hugh Dalton, who was Chancellor of Exchequer during those years. And this I read, and I was really impressed by this sentence of him, that every day the spokesmen of the city were to number 10 Downing Street to complain, and they were not doing the same profits as the industrial sectors. So, and this is why there were a lot of attacks against this cheaper money policy, and in the end had to be reduced the intensity of the cheaper money policy, and Hugh Dalton had to resign because there was a leakage of information coming out of a national plan to improve even more the economy. And that was a very strange situation because Hugh Dalton did not facilitate this leakage. So something strange happened there. And so was something more political that then affected the development of economic policy or monetary policy and affected, income distribution of that country, the social welfare, whatever. Many things change because of the resignation of Hugh Dalton and in 1947 and the abandonment of the cheaper money policy. England went back to a cheap money policy, which was something different. Well, okay, these are things that happened too many years ago.
Well, it's very interesting. It could have become an example to follow if it was eventually claimed successful, right? I mean, maybe it would have been the model we could apply today, but now we don't have the evidence because Hugh resigned.
Yeah, at least it affected my life. It affected what I wanted to study at the time.
That's it's a fascinating anecdote. Carlo, before we close, is there anything else you would like to investigate, or will you just continue in this still fascinating subject? I mean, there's still lots to discover, I suppose.
No, I'm still very interested in this subject because it's continuously going on. Things are changing all the time. And I think it is not only, an academic issue, is not only something that belongs to the world of the scientific community, something that has immediate reflection of everyday life on politics in particular. So I think I will keep doing it. What my desire would be to try to put together whatever I've studied in these years to try to make some sort of, compendium of everything and what we have to study further for the future. This is a desire that I don't know whether I will be able to do it.
We would very much appreciate if you could. Carlo, thank you so much for sharing these insights with us. Very enlightening to know more about the connection between fiscal and monetary policy and the role of politics in there and how it's all connected to the income distribution. So we appreciate your participation in our program.
Thank you to you. Thanks for the invitation.
And thank you all for watching another episode of Future Frame TV. We hope you liked it. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already. Please comment if you would like to know more about a specific subject of inequalities. Either way, we would be happy if you wanted to join us again for another episode of Future Frame TV. I'm Elise Krozer, your host for the Inequalities channel, and I wish you a nice afternoon. Have a good day. Bye-bye.